I am blithering. I'm blithering so much. Welcome back to Dead Good Book Reviews. I'm Judith, and the time has finally come. Yes, it is time to tell you why you should be so excited to read The Galaxy and the Ground Within by Becky Chambers, because obviously you've already pre-ordered your copy and now you're just sat anxiously by the letterbox waiting for it to arrive. Right? As is hopefully evident, I do not actually have a physical copy of this yet. I have it on pre-order, I have paid good money for it, but the publisher were also kind enough to let me read an advanced digital review copy of this via NetGalley, so I can tell you about it today on publication day and just spill all of my thoughts out onto the visual paper for you. I'm very excited about this book, I don't know if you can tell. So yes, I was sent a copy of this book for free. Nobody's paying me to talk about books. All thoughts and opinions are my own. I'm also going to keep this as spoiler-free as I can. I don't think that there's necessarily much you could spoil in Becky Chambers' books, because I think the book would still be beautiful even if you knew everything about the plot. But I will try my best not to spoil anything, and if you do want to go in knowing absolutely nothing, obviously click away now. So if you're not aware, this is the fourth novel and the fifth work in Becky Chambers' Wayfarers series, so there are 4 novels and 1 novella. The series starts with The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet, which published in 2014, and the series sadly ends here with this gorgeous book. And I just want to take a moment to bask in the glow of this cover, because honestly, my bisexual heart is very happy and I cannot wait to have it on my shelf facing out all the time because it makes me so happy. Becky Chambers is a California-based author. She's probably best known for writing this series, which is multiple award winning. It's well loved by most people. Her next book is A Psalm for the Wild Built, which is a novella. It's the start of a new novella series and I am itching to read it. I am so excited. The Galaxy and the Ground Within takes place in the same universe as the other Wayfarers books, but we're in a completely different place. This is kind of like a place where I think 5 wormhole tunnels meet. So the wormholes that are being created in The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet, a lot of them meet here. And as such, this place where previously there would have just been nothing has become an intergalactic rest stop. So people stop there to refuel, to wait their turn to go back through the tunnels. There's a lot of places that are kind of meant to cater to people just stopping for a very short period of time. So we follow the events of the owner of one of these places and 4 people who have ended up there, stopping over, but they end up stuck there for longer than they anticipated because something goes terribly wrong with a lot of the satellites and they're all just basically stranded and they can't go anywhere for a set period of time. In a lot of ways, yes, this is a simple slice of life story, but isn't that what Becky Chambers writes best? I absolutely loved the characters in this story. If you are familiar with this series, we do have one character who has appeared in other stories, Pei, and it's just fantastic to see her and get her perspective on things in an entire book. I'm not gonna lie, I very much enjoyed it. All the other characters are completely new to us, so you don't have to have read the other books in order. I will come on to that shortly. But all the characters are amazing. I really loved the different perspectives they brought and their different backstories and all of the different stuff that they brought into the story and the way that they played off each other. They were really carefully, obviously very carefully thought out as to how these characters will interact and what they care about and where they will end up going. And basically, if you didn't love these characters as much, this whole book wouldn't work because you have to care about all of them. And I was surprised by how much I cared about all of them, because quite often I will find one person that I really like and everyone else is sort of set dressing. But in this case, I genuinely was feeling affection towards everyone. I've mentioned that this is slice of life and that's what Becky Chambers writes best. I think Closed and Common Orbit is probably the only exception to that. But in this case, I really liked all the different stories that flowed into one in this case. We get a lot of the backstory for these characters, as I've mentioned, and I liked the way that the backstory elements fit into the main story. Does that make sense? Like, it all slots together really well. And I also appreciated that Becky Chambers didn't write a complete, oh, we all love each other, it's all fine kind of story. There is still elements of conflict between these characters. They don't just agree on everything because they happen to be stuck together. And I thought that was really interesting. Despite the fact that arguably not a lot happens in this story, so much happens. And I think Becky Chambers has a real talent for increasing your feeling for things that are arguably quite small. Like, some things that happen in this book, if they happened in a different book, you'd be like, that was a minor plot point. And in this book, you're like, that took up my entire world. I was only caring about that one thing for this entire book. I think that's an example of why Becky Chambers' writing is so good, is that she does make you care about these things, and she does bring out this amazing sense of the small stuff can be very important and should be very important, and I really appreciated that. So the whole story is very quiet, and arguably isn't kind of, world ending, everything's hinging on these people meeting and we're going to spin off and mention that in the future if they hadn't met everything would have exploded. It's not like that, but it doesn't mean that the story's not important and it doesn't mean that the story's not good, and I really, really enjoyed it. The fact that nobody in this book is human, not one character at all. They have mentions of humans and there is discussion of humans, but the main characters, none of them are, and I think that's really, really smart, and it's not something totally unusual. We've had that in other books too, but I think this is the first book where it's felt very evident that the humans are not the main characters in this, and I really like that for a couple of reasons. One, I think it's entertaining to hear other aliens talk about humans and how weird they are. That's always going to be funny to me. There's a whole bit about cheese that just cracked me up. But also I think it's important because Becky Chambers takes this idea of, so often we take this idea of, oh, it's such a human story, but in this case, it's not. This is about sentience. Having read space opera, which has this whole idea of like the sentience wars and proving that you are sentient, but in a very humorous way, I think that the idea of belonging to the GC, which is kind of like you're civilized if you belong to this, it's all wonderful, was really interesting. And that idea of belonging and the importance of belonging comes out especially in one character's perspective, and I just thought it was really, really well done. I can't describe it as a very human story, even though it feels like it is. It's a very sentient story, and I really liked that. I appreciated where this book fits in with the other books. I did actually reread this entire series, not entirely in order. I think that that having reread it and having read this, you get more of the references, especially to other species, throughout the series, so I liked that this book definitely feels like part of that hub of ideas, and Becky Chambers, as much as all of her books are very different, they are very clearly set in the same universe when you read them together. On the subject of what order to read them in, I've mentioned it a couple of times. If you're thinking about picking up this series and you're for some reason watching a video about the 4th full-length novel in it, hey, I don't know, I think you could read this first. You wouldn't destroy your entire life. It would probably spoil maybe one thing, but other than that, you'd probably be fine. The books that I absolutely think you have to read in order to get the most out of them are Long Way to a Small Angry Planet and then Closed in Common Orbit. I just think that's the best reading experience you can have. But the others you can kind of read whenever, and I would say that actually this book is so outside of the connections that have been drawn in the previous books that you'd probably cope just fine. I think this book manages to be loud and quiet at the same time. Becky Chambers 100% sticks the landing of, I don't need to turn this series into anything bigger than what it was. I don't need to do an Avengers Assemble to finish the book where everyone meets up together and they all decide to save the universe. That's not what this series is. That's not what this book is. But it so closes out the series in a really poignant way. As I say, you could read them in any order, but to read them ending here feels very different. It is a real message of hope, and it's not necessarily a naive hope. It's a hope that's fully aware of the limitations, but it is still really beautiful and amazing. I was trying to think of some comparisons, some other things I could talk about that I could compare this to, and I don't have any because I genuinely cannot compare anything to Becky Chambers and feel comfortable doing so, because there is nothing where if you really enjoyed that, you will absolutely enjoy this. I was having to come up with some for a family member who wanted some recommendations, and I was like, I don't know, maybe Children of Time. I don't read a lot of sci-fi. So if you have anything that you like as much as you like Becky Chambers, please do pop it in the comments below. I would love to hear it. My final thoughts. Usually I do a should you or should you not read this at this point, but all I've written in my notes is yes, with like 50 S's. I absolutely think you should read this. This is one of my favourite books. I read it in 2020, so it was one of my favourite books of 2020, but I think I'm going to try and reread it in 2021, so it can count as one of my favourite books of 2021 as well. 100%. It's so great. 5 stars. Live your best life and read this book, honestly. And then tell me how much you cried, because I cried quite a lot. Thank you so much for letting me waffle at you for however long this has ended up being, probably like 5 minutes, because so much waffling, I'm going to have to cut so much of it out. It's so much harder to review a book that you loved, because all I want to do is just be like, just trust me on this. Just read it. You don't need to hear about it, just trust me. So that's what I'm asking you to do. If you were confused by this video, just trust me, you definitely do want to read it. It's great. Thank you so much for watching. While you're down there commenting recommendations, you can also let me know which is your favourite of the Wayfarers books if you have read all of them. I would love to know. Or if there are any you have left to read. Are you excited? Tell me. While you're down there commenting, you can also subscribe. You can follow me on all of my social media. All of that will make me feel loved and appreciated. That's all from me, and I will see you in the next one. There's gonna be some bloopers now. This is gonna get annoying. I can feel it. International? Intergalactic. International. Why do I keep saying international?